All right, in the tour, Siman Tav Kuf Lamed Zayin, we're starting Davar HaAved, things that are a loss. There is a difference between losing money and not making a profit. And that's very important as we go through this, and it will come in many times. The broadest principle that we can say is that in general, you're allowed to do things to prevent a loss, but you're not allowed to do things to create profit on HaMoed. So the Torah reads, Davar ha'aved mותר לעשותו HaMoed below shinui. You are allowed to do something to prevent a loss on HaMoed without any type of change in the way you do it. Hilchach, therefore, השלחין, שהיא שצריך להשקותה תמיד. There are two types of fields that we talk about in the Talmud broadly. השלחין and הבעל. השלחין is a field where I have to regularly water it, and הבעל is a field that is self-watering. There's an aquifer, it rains on it enough, whatever, depending upon where you are. This could be true. Shim lo ken tafsid. And if you don't water this field, you'll lose the crop that's in it. Mותר להשקותה. You're allowed to water it. ודוקא שהתחיל קודם המועד. This is only if you watered it before HaMoed. שאז נפסדת, because then you'll lose it. ואם לא ישקנה יותר, if I don't, I will lose the crop if I don't water it more. אבל אם לא השקיע קודם, לכן, אסור להשקותה. But if I didn't water the crop before HaMoed, you can't water it for the first time in HaMoed, because the Rishonim use all sorts of difficult terminology to say it, but they didn't understand the process. But what it is the seed hasn't started to germinate without the first water. So if it hasn't been watered once, the seed won't start to germinate, so it won't die from lack of water. Once you water it the first time and it starts to germinate and it starts to grow, if it doesn't have the water it needs, then it can die. So if it started to grow, then I can continue giving it the water it needs to continue to grow, to survive. But if it hasn't started to grow yet, I cannot make it start to grow for the first time on HaMoed. The Raavad adds something here, and that is if I was planning on doing it and onesa happened, something out of my control prevented me from doing it, then you could water it for the first time on HaMoed. Vim hi sade lecha, if it's a wet field. כאילו התחיל להשקותה קודם. It's like you already had watered it. For instance, you're doing your spring wheat and you plant it before Pesach and it rains, or it rained before I planted it, so that the soil is already wet and moist. I haven't watered it, but in fact, it's as if it were watered. אבל שדה הבעל, שהיא שדה שאין צריך להשקותה, שדי לה במטר השמים, a stay habal, which I don't have to water it. It's enough the rain water that it gets. There are many fields like that. This in many countries in the world outside of Israel, not so many in Israel. ואין משכינוסה אלא להשפיחה. And the only reason why I water this field is to improve the crop. It will live. It might not be as nice, but it will live. Asur, then it's asur להשקותה. I can't water it. Afilu beis shlichim lo hitiru ela hecha deleka tircha yisera. And even in a beis shlichim, we only allowed it when there wasn't a lot of schlep involved in it. Kagon mei hamayan, like coming from a well. Loshna yashan or chadash, it doesn't matter, new well, old well, velo chashinan, kevan shu chadash shema yiskalka. We're not concerned since it's a new well, maybe it will be damaged, new spring will be damaged. Aval mayim mechunasim v'nikavim beguma, but water that's in a cistern, v'tzarech liglos mehem, and I have to use a bucket to pull the water out. V'yesh bo torach, and there's a lot of schlep involved in this. Or mimei geshami mekubatzim, or rainwater again that's gathered in a cistern-like thing. Asur lashkos mehem. You can't water from them because you'll have to use buckets to bring the water up. Afilu beis arugo so lamala mizo. Even two patches, two vegetable patches, one above the other. Ein dolim mitachtona lahashkota. I cannot use even a few buckets of water, even though it's not such a schlep, to take from the lower one to the top one. Afilu achas chetzio gvoa vechetzio nemucha. Even if it's one patch, and half of it's high and half of it's low. Ein dolim miamakom hanamuch lahashkosa gvoa. I cannot use a bucket to take from the lower one to the higher one. Yoros maim moshchim mehagamim. Water that flows from lakes through channels. Im eno poskim shemekalchim tamid. If it doesn't never stop flowing through the channel, always flows. Mutar lashkos mehem. The im hem poskim asurim. As long as they always flow, it's allowed. But if they are interrupted from time to time, then you're not allowed to. If they're dug deep enough that the water always flows into them, then we won't be concerned that you're going to come and deepen the channel or pump water into it or something. Bismanenu, where we turn a tap to water a field, I mean, not the same type of tap that you have in your house, these are much larger ones, and they're done, depending on where you are, either by flooding the whole field, especially with orchards and so on, or watering it with the massive sprinkler systems and so on. These things, I don't believe there is ever any real tircha involved, at least as Chazal understood tircha, shlep, and therefore they should all be mutter, no matter what type of field you're dealing with today. And as long as you've done it in advance, I mean, there is something to this. We always have to think about HaMoed as a special time, not a time to get as much work as I can in between the first days of Yontif and the last days of Yontif in your Israel, first day and last day. Right? It should be a time when we plan to not be so much involved with the world and more involved with Torah and Tefillah and Avodas Hashem. Charitzim shemayim baim derech sham. These are trenches that the water comes through. Mehanacher l'sadeh, from a river to a field. Asur l'ashkosa mehem. You're not allowed to water from them. Afal pishin ismalu kodem yantiv, even though they were filled up before yantiv. Lefishem poskim, because sometimes they flow, sometimes no. Rivers go up and down in their heights. The level of the river is not the same throughout the year. And when it's high, the water flows through these trenches. When it's low, it doesn't. Vim amas hamayim overes beinehem, shaz eno poskim mutar. If there is a type of artesian well involved in the system, so that the water never stops, it's allowed. Afilu im rov hasadeh roy lashkosa mina ama. Afilu im ein rov. Even if you could not have enough water from the well to water most of your field, nonetheless, since some of the water is coming from this artesian well or artesian spring, therefore it's mutter to have the additional water filled in through the trench from the river. Again, most of these things are not so relevant to us other than they teach us the general principles of what is tircha. I mean, sometimes you see that even if there would be a loss, right? I'm going to lose my field if I don't water it now, but I don't have a way without shlep. The rabbis did not allow, Chazal did not allow you to do a lot of physical labor on HaMoed. All right. Beis hashlichin sheyesh ba mayan. If I have a field that needs to be watered and it has its own spring in it, shemimav notfi mimenu l'sadei acheres, and the water not only waters this spring, but this field, but it waters another field as well. Umiskabchim cham, and it makes a pool in the lower field. V'nase brecha, it makes a pool. Kol zman shemitatvim lo pasak mayan rishon yocholim lashkos mimenu sadei acheres. As long as the water from the upper well has not stopped, I can connect to the pool in the lower field to irrigate yet another field. From from the spring, from the pool that it's gathered in. Avalim pasek mayan harishon. But if the upper artesian well has stopped flowing, the water pressure is no longer large enough for it to flow on its own, or afilu lo pasak ve'eno mitnefes yoter, or if it didn't stop entirely, but it's not flowing, it's prohibited. Meaning, at this point, I'm sort of stuck, and I can't draw from the pool anymore to water other fields. Vegetables that I want to eat them on HaMoed. I mean, they didn't have a supermarket that they would go to, but even today this is relevant. A farmer, a vegetable farmer, who has all sorts of vegetables, and he is going to harvest them so that on HaMoed, so that people will have fresh vegetables for HaMoed and for the last day of Yom Tov, right? Yachod lidlos maim lahashkosan. He's allowed to, even if he has to use a bucket, he's allowed to do that to water them. Kadesh yigdalu v'yei ruyim lamoed, so that they will grow better and stronger and healthier, so they'll be fit for the Yom Tov table. Avolim eno rotze laochlan. But if I'm not going to eat them now, this part of my field I'm harvesting now for HaMoed and Yom Tov. That part of my field I'm only going to harvest after Yom Tov. And I want to water the whole field so that all of those vegetables will be better when I get around to harvesting. That I can't do. I can water the part that I'm going to be using on HaMoed, even with a bucket, the part that I would have to use a bucket for, but I'm not going to harvest it on HaMoed, that I have to wait. Can't water it now, even though it may be a loss and that the vegetables won't be as good, but as long as they won't die. Even if they'll die, it seems, because we prohibited previously using a bucket to water your field, even if there's a loss because of the great amount of tircha involved. Meaning, you can do tircha, you can schlep on HaMoed to make not only your Yom Tov, but other people's Yom Tov better, right? But I can't schlep to prevent loss. Again, today watering a field is irrelevant because you turn the tap and there's water. Sedei habal, a self-watering field. Sheyesh ba ilanos. It has trees in it. Yachol amshich mayim mitachas ilan ze letachas ilan ze ubevad shelo yishke kol hasadeh. I am allowed to. What they used to do is they would dig a donut around the base of every tree. Before drip irrigation existed. They would dig a donut around each tree, and they would connect all of the trees together with a little trench. And then I let the water flow into one of them, and the water flows up and it goes into all of them. Now, these are small trenches, and over time they will fill themselves in. The donuts around the trees will fill themselves in. And I'm allowed to go out and redig them, because it's not a lot of work, it's a limited amount of work, at least by a farmer's standards, not by the standards of a person who lives in the city. It's not a lot of work, and it's defined, meaning it's not like when I'm getting water, I can be doing it for forever. It never ends. So I'm allowed to do that on Yom Tov, on HaMoed. I cannot make the various little trenches that run around the roots of the grapes, the grapevines, for the first time on HaMoed. Hayu asuyim kavar v'niskalkalu. If you already made them and they got damaged, as happens, yacholim l'taknan. I'm allowed to fix them. Ein osim betchila ha'ama hamoshechas maim l'sadeh. Haisa asuya kavar v'niskalkala shelo nishar ba'omka ela tefach yachola mika vav tefachim. If the Samim is a big irrigation ditch, they were an amma wide and an amma deep, 6 tefachim, so 24 inches, 2 feet square, 2 feet deep, 2 feet wide, if it existed, but over the course of time, it's filled in, and it's only a tefach deep at this point, I'm allowed to dig it out to its full depth of 6 tefachim, of 24 inches, and that would be allowed to do on Chol HaMoed. Again, this wouldn't be, at least for the people that do such things, it wouldn't be a great tericha because it's already soft, it's already been dug out. It's not the packed dirt that you have to do work hard to get it out. Asur liftoach makom l'sadeh kadei shikansu ba'mayim l'ashkosa. You're not allowed to open a side of your field so that the water will flow into it and water it. But if this was a common way people fished. I have a field that's lower than the river going by. I open up a side of it and the water flows in. Then I seal that side again. The water sinks down to the water table and dries out, and the fish are dead on the field. And so I can get a lot of fish very easily this way. I open above so it flows below. Mutter, in this case, and then I open up the lower place so it goes out, but I have a trap here so the fish can't get out. Even though the field is also going to be watered in a way that normally would not be allowed in Chol HaMoed, because that is, in terms of Chol HaMoed, is secondary to the fact that I now have fresh fish. And before we had refrigerators, fresh fish is very important, right? Without a refrigerator, fish don't keep very long. Asur lahashvos hasadeh litzorech harisha. I cannot level out a field so it's easier to plow. You can't plow a field that isn't relatively level. So you level the field first, then you plow it. But if I need to thresh grain that I am going to then grind up into flour on Chol HaMoed for Yantif, Kigon im shuha kulam mutter. That, and all the people, threshing floors were common. One person would thresh the grain there and another. And all the people are going to use this in the Chol HaMoed because fresh threshed grain is better than grain that's been sitting around. It is mutter. The reason this was true is you didn't have rodents and bugs digging in your fresh grain yet. So people would often try and do this just before they would use it. And so having winter wheat for Pesach and summer wheat for Sukkot was a time that these were harvest times for both those two grain harvests, and people would want to do this to have the fresh stuff. It would be much less rodent infested and cleaner and nicer. Asur l'ilkot eitzim min hasadeh liafoso. I'm not allowed to gather up wood that's lying on the field to make it better, lacharisha, so it's better to plow. V'im nikar shemekaven l'tzorkan shetzarecha eitzim. But if it's clear that he's gathering the wood because he needs the wood, I take the big logs and leaving the small pieces, mutter, then I'm allowed to do it. Asur l'katzetz anvei ha'ilan. I'm not allowed to prune a tree on Chol HaMoed, l'takno, to fix it. V'im nikar shemekaven b'shvil hanafim. But if it's clear that you want the branches, la'achilam lebehemto, to feed it to an animal. Some animals will eat fresh, not large wood, but fresh growth. Kagon shekatzitz kulu mitzad echad bakar. Like I'm cutting all on one side. I'm not pruning the tree. I'm harvesting one side of the tree. Then it's mutter. Ein matlin ha'ilanos v'lo mazhimim hanetios aval sachin ha'ilanos ve'es haperos b'shemen. Exactly what these things are, I'm not sure. But they had ways of using smoke burning tiny little fires under the trees that would drive away the insects and worms that were in them so that they wouldn't attack the fruit close to harvest time. You're not allowed to do this on Chol HaMoed, but you are allowed, they would put oil on the fruit. It would make it ripen better. When you are allowed to do this on Chol HaMoed, the next thing is an interesting thing that I'm not going to do the whole thing inside. It will be on the attached at the bottom in YouTube, so you can read the whole thing if you want to. Ishus ve'akbarim. Ishus is a animal that all the Rishonim say is a blind animal that lives in holes in the ground, but it comes up and eats the fruit on trees. And mice and rats, shemafsidin b'sadei ilan, they, in a orchard, they caused great damage to the tree. Mutar l'todem kedarko. You're allowed to trap them in the normal way. And if there is a sedei lavan, a grain field next to it, I can also trap them. This is a machlokas in the normal way, or do I have to use a shinui? It's a machlokas tanaim, it's a machlokas amarim, it's a machlokas rishonim. The way they would trap is they would dig a hole in the ground and they would put bait in the hole, and then they had some way, some type of snare that would trap the animal when it went after the bait in the hole. Because digging the hole in the ground, this is the best way of doing it, was a huge amount of schlep on Chol HaMoed. Only if I'm going to suffer a great loss would this be allowed. The way of doing it with the shinui is they would hang the bait from a pole that they would put in the ground, and they would have some type of trap that would, again, some type of snare that would grab the animal. So this is a problem that they had. We have all sorts of things that prevent this. Prevent the animals from affecting we have all sorts of traps that are much easier than this and so on. So we are allowed to trap any animals that would cause damage to our crops no matter where they are. In the middle of this paragraph, I will make it 2 paragraphs in the YouTube. It says, Ein machnisin tzon ladir. I'm not allowed to put my flock in a pasture, b'chol HaMoed lezavel hasadeh. If my intent was that they drop their manure in the field to be fertilizer for the field. If a non-Jew comes and he drives my flock or his flock into the field on Chol HaMoed, he's allowed to. Af b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos. Afilu im machzik lo tova, even if I owe him a favor, al shehechanich sa'an, because he brought them in. U'bavad shelo yiten lo schar, as long as I don't pay him. No, the idea of amira la'akum, is, right, telling a non-Jew to do it for you, or right, hiring a janitor to do things on Shabbos in the shul is not so pashut. Ve'afilu ein nosein lo ela schar mezono asur, even if I'm only giving him food, it's asur. Ubiyam tov yachol liten lo schar mezono. On Yom Tov I can give him his food, as opposed to Shabbos I can. Ubavad shelo yiten lo schar, as long as I don't pay him. Ubechol HaMoed afilu im nosein lo schar acher mutter. And on Chol HaMoed, even though I'm paying him, it's allowed. Ubavad shelo yiskirenu, ubavad shelo yisayo, v'lo yimsor lo shomer l'nar hatzon. As long as I don't hire him specifically for this, he does it on his own, then I'm allowed to pay him. Or he may know that every year he does this and I pay him for what he does in Chol HaMoed, right? But I can't have someone help him to drive the flock from one place to another. If I pay him by the week, month, or year, he's a regular employee, gets a regular paycheck. Then I'm allowed to help him on Chol HaMoed do this. And I'm even allowed to give him someone that will drive the flock in my field from place to place. So otherwise what happens if you don't move the flock around, they tend to stay in one place and you get a lot of fertilizer in one place, but it's not evenly distributed over your field. Asur liktor hasade b'chol HaMoed. You're not allowed to harvest your field in Chol HaMoed. Imhu be'inyan she'enu nefsed, as long as it won't be a loss. V'im yamod ad la'achar HaMoed, if it will last until I can harvest after Chol HaMoed, after Yom Tov. V'im ein lo ma yochal, but if I'm a worker and I have nothing to eat, kotzer, v'dash, v'zori, borer, kadarko, I can do all the harvest. U'bavad shelo yidosh b'peros, as long as I don't do disha b'peros. I'm not sure exactly how this works into the way we do things today. It's not something that we do, so I'm not going to try and figure out exactly what it is. V'hani mili she'enu tzorech ela lo levado. This is when only he needs it. Aval imhu tzorech ladush l'tzorech rabim dash afilu b'peros. But if we need this, disha can be done either commercially, or the preparation of the fruits can be done in a commercial way or in an individual way. I'm not allowed to do it in the commercial way for my own personal use. However, if I have an entire village, an entire city that needs my fruit on Chol HaMoed, then I'm allowed to do it even in the commercial way. One more halacha. Mi sheyesh lo kerem etzel karmo shel akum. I have a vineyard, and next to my vineyard is a non-Jew's vineyard. V'akum botzer shelo b'chol HaMoed, and it's harvest time, and he's harvesting his on Chol HaMoed. V'im lo yiftzor ha'Yisrael gam shelo yafsid, and if I don't harvest mine also at the same time, I'm going to lose. This can be because there are animals that will be eating the grapes around harvest time, and once his are gone, they're going to concentrate on mine. It can be that he might steal from me. There are all sorts of things. Yachol lebotzro v'lidro chayayin v'lasos hachavios v'kol tzarkei yayin v'lo shinui. I'm allowed to harvest them and trample on the grapes and to put it in the barrels and all the needs of the wine without any change. And this is as long as I didn't intend to do it on Yom Tov, meaning if the grapes are ripe, I should do it before Yom Tov. I should make sure I get it done before Yom Tov, or hold it until after Yom Tov. It's only because that my neighbor is doing this and he's a non-Jew and he's going to cause problems, or his harvest now is going to cause me problems, that therefore it's a loss that I would be able to do. However, if he intended, listen, I have free time. Workers are cheaper on Chol HaMoed. This is discussed many times in the Gemara. Because people don't work on Chol HaMoed, if you have a heter to hire workers, they're cheaper when there are a lot of unemployed people around. Then you're not allowed to do the work on Chol HaMoed. We continue for several more Simanim on Davar HaAved, and we will learn more about this as time goes on.